Hey guys, this is James.
And this is Denny from TeaDB bringing you guys episode 115 with a special guest.
Scott from Yunnan Sourcing.
So, Scott, we're at Scott's house. We're hanging out. We've been here for a day, drinking a lot of tea. A lot of tea.
Yeah.
And checking out a lot of his tea stuff. We've been talking, having a bunch of conversations. So, this episode, we're going to drink some tea, but we're going to mostly do kind of more question and answer style, basically. So, what are we drinking, sir?
Yeah. This one, I just grabbed it. I mean, there's tons of tea right over there, everywhere. And it's a tea that we made in 2013 spring called Da Si, small village in Fengqing area. And actually some of the oldest tea trees that I've seen, you know, a lot of them are 300-400 years old. Mm-hmm. Some are 200 years old. But overall, a really impressive, just a really impressive environment. And actually I hadn't drank this tea for a couple of, almost since like kind of the end of 2013. And then recently I drank it again, and wow, it's just changed a lot. And it's a really good feeling tea. And I think it'll be a really good tea to drink today, because today is, you know, really hot. And I love to drink raw pu'erh on a hot day.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're gonna sweat.
Yeah, we are.
We're gonna sweat no matter what, so we might as well have the tea make us sweat. So, anyways, let's drink this Da Si. I'm gonna go pop over here and grab my tea needle.
Cool.
And I've actually had this tea very recently, coincidentally, and I definitely enjoyed it. Just kind of had a sample a couple of months ago.
Yeah. And
Have you had this, Denny?
I don't think I actually have. But I've had a lot of Yunnan Sourcing teas, as you all know.
Sure.
So while we're kind of going through that, let's talk a little bit about you, Scott, just so that some of the folks who don't know much about you can get a better grasp on your sort of background and history. So, how did you kind of get involved in tea? That's a big question, and feel free to just kind of.
Sure.
This is a meandering conversation, so
no, I mean it's kind of a long story, and you know, it could be long or short. Mm-hmm. Well, I graduated with a degree from UCSB in history, and I specialized, you know, just an undergraduate degree. I specialized in Chinese history, and then after I graduated, I went with the Santa Barbara City College group, and their professor there asked me to go with them as kind of an assistant teacher. And I went to China first in 1996, actually, in Shandong province, Shandong University. And I just fell in love with China and really enjoyed, an incredible experience. And then I decided I wanted to go back. So after I came back, kind of after a few months in China with the student group, I worked and saved money, and in 1998, I went back, and very quickly, I ended up in Yunnan province, and in Kunming, and I traveled in Dali and Lijiang and Sichuanbana, and went back to Kunming and stayed there in a youth hostel at the Kunhu Fandian, which is one of the two main places that foreigners could stay in Kunming at that time. At that time, you couldn't just stay anywhere, so. I stayed there in 10 renminbi a night dorm room, and I met an older Japanese gentleman who spoke, and at that time I could speak a little bit of Chinese, but not very much. And I met this older guy who spoke both English, French. He was fluent in Mandarin. Wow. So I hung out with him, and we went to restaurants, and then he took me to the in Kunming, the candy and tea market. At that time, in Kunming, the tea market was kind of downtown towards the train station, just off of Beijing Lu, and at that time it was the candy and tea market. But that's kind of how I first started drinking pu'erh. Was in '98.
Cool.
So yeah, and then again in 2004, I went back with the intention to live in Kunming. and very quickly got into tea and decided, wow, this is something that I could do while, maybe to help me support my studies. And very quickly, I was just consumed by the whole thing, and just, wow. What, in 2004, when you went online, and you looked around and you saw Pu'erh, well, Pu'erh was just like, a few people were selling it, it just wasn't very well known, and there weren't very many choices. There was like, camel's breath mini tocha and, tocha and, just really not much. And I thought, wow, because I saw this huge variety of, I went to the wholesale market. At that time, there was another wholesale market in Kunming in the north, in the Jinshi tea market. And I went up there, and I thought, oh my gosh, there's thousands of kinds of pu'erh. Thousands. Yeah. And was just totally unrepresented. And, of course, I was excited, and I've always been kind of a collector. I was always, I collected stamps, and I collected records, and I still do, vinyl. And I was just extremely enamored with the whole thing. And then the ability to drink and experience the tea too, and that dimension to it. And I just was sucked in. Yeah. And the rest is kind of history, I guess, because, I was online and selling on eBay. And
So that's kind of when Yunnan Sourcing officially got started, right around 2004?
Yeah, the very end of 2004. That's when I kind of registered my eBay account and just started selling. And actually, it was a lot of what we ended up selling was through customers, because when people went online and they saw, oh wow, this guy has 50 different kinds of pu'erh, and they started to ask me questions. And so at that time my Chinese was still, it was getting better and better all the time, but it wasn't, it wasn't great. So I remember one customer, actually a guy, and I forget his name, but he lived in the Yukon Territory in Canada. He said, can you get that that Banjiang tea? Huh. So then I thought, Banjiang? I'm like, okay. So I went to the tea market and asked people there. I said, Banjiang. Oh, big reaction. So that kind of, so it was a lot of stuff like that was kind of through customers, and then of course starting the dialogue with, as I got more involved with the Chinese pu'erh sellers there, just really starting to learn, and that just kind of started it. And then of course, I really learned Chinese almost entirely through hanging out in tea shops and hanging out in tea mountains with people. And so and of course, my wife, at that time my girlfriend, I learned a lot with her too. So so that's kind of how I started. I think I probably just put about a lot in there.
Yeah.
So we're gonna see how that works.
Right on. It's cool, and I'm sure that a lot of folks out listening can resonate with this, that often it's someone who you know or someone who you meet who is the person to introduce you to tea, and to sit down and have a session and really experience tea in, I don't want to say the proper way, but experience loose leaf tea for the first time. And that really does it's cool that it's very much about sharing experiences and relationships as much as it is about the tea in some ways. Of course, the tea always will speak for itself, but it's kind of cool. The same way with me and with meeting Brett, for instance, and somewhat, me having an influence on James a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, yeah, it's cool. I like that part of it.
Yeah, that's really, in China, tea is just such a part of the culture. And when you go somewhere and you sit down and you drink tea with people, especially as a foreigner, it's like saying, it's putting yourself in an element that that Chinese people are very comfortable with and that they're familiar with. And it's also respectful too, to sit down and drink tea with somebody is to be respectful and to try to understand it and appreciate it. And that's the thing, is I think I learned also really how to be diplomatic and all kinds of things. Really, I learned through that medium of tea in China, and I think it really served me and my just my own development and my own appreciation for Chinese culture. What better way to do that than to do it through tea?
Yeah.
And to really deeply have an appreciation for it as well. And I think that the people that I met and the people that are my friends and the people that I do business with as well, and many of them are my friends, I think that that really came about because of a shared appreciation.
Yeah.
Obviously not everybody that I met was a above the board player. There were definitely people who wanted to cheat me, cheat the Lao Wai. But through that, gradually I started to really learn and understand who was my friend and who I could learn from, So let's drink this. I'm not good at talking and brewing tea, but hopefully you guys will be forgiving. We either get some...
Great.
Yeah. So let's do the wash. This cup's been sitting overnight. I don't know what was the last tea we drank, but yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's just kind of how I got into tea and where I've been, last 10 years full time in China.
Let me interrupt. So there's a lot more pieces that we've talked through. So you started on eBay, started with something like 40 teas or something like that. Obviously now, I'm sure a lot of our folks watching have been to the website. There are so many types of tea on your site. It's absurd. It's an encyclopedia or like a library, as we've talked about a little bit. And so what was the transition? What was the transition from going from eBay to where you are today? How does that play?
Yeah, well, eBay, especially if you're based in China and you're having to try to, just calculate shipping. eBay is, and over the years they've gotten kind of like, they basically told you this is what you can charge for shipping. And it did combine shipping, and there's just all these problems with selling on eBay and all these different countries, and then of course having to pay fees and not really liking the look and feel of things. And so we gradually worked towards building our own website, which on PrestaShop back in I think 2009.
Thank you, sir.
And that worked, and it's served us well. PrestaShop is definitely not my favorite platform, but we just recently launched Taiwan Sourcing. Got to plug that.
We'll definitely get it.
But Taiwan Sourcing was done on Shopify, and we're really excited to be able to transition YunnanSourcing.com and YunnanSourcing US to Shopify and add more functionality and we still want to have a really easy navigable site because we do have a huge selection of things.
How did that selection grow? Because you're in Kunming, you're going to the tea markets, you're selling some of the tea that you're finding there that you're liking. People are asking you about it because they've never had these really crazy teas that you're selling, and then suddenly they're asking for different types of teas. How'd you go from 40 to whatever immeasurable quantity of tea that you guys have right now?
Well, I kind of started out by just really looking at the tradition of the different factories.
Okay.
Like Monghai Tea Factory and Xiaguan Tea Factory and the various Nanjian, like Nanjian Tulin or Nanjian Fenghuang tea factories, Mengku, Rongshi, or Shuanjia Mengku as it's also called, and then various others, and not necessarily having to be factory teas but that's kind of where I started, and those teas were accessible. They were affordable to people that maybe didn't have a lot of experience with teas, and some of them were very good. And I just started to realize wow, there's all this. Not only are all these different tea factories, but there's all these different teas that are being produced by these tea factories. And so I just kind of gradually started to find the ones that I felt that were good and trying. In the beginning, I didn't have very many customers, and I just tried to buy, and buy like a case of tea, maybe 84 cakes, especially back then, most cases were 84 cakes. So that was like a big thing, at that time, to be able to buy a whole case. But just really coming from that tradition of like the different factories and just knowing like, okay, these teas are kind of more like mainstream Chinese teas, Chinese pours that people enjoy, and they, like with Monghai and Xiaoguan, they have a proven track record. They're not going to disappoint anybody.
Right.
And they were affordable, so I just started to offer them, and gradually, just finding the ones that were more unique or special among those offerings. Because there's, and then like Xiaoguan Tea Factory has the Fei Tai, the FT Productions, which is a Taiwanese company, kind of OEM production. So I remember back in 2006, finding some of those was really exciting, because at that time, those were all basically we're going to Taiwan.
Right.
And that's actually how I met my friend Jihai, or Hailong of Hailong Hao. I walked into a shop one day because I saw this like corner of my eye. I was like, whoa, is that an FT Tuocha? Xiaoguan FT Tuocha, and I walked into his place, and immediately I just was like, wow, this really nice guy, really straight up. Like he knew what it was. He had this connections with Taiwan because he'd been doing, actually as a teenager with his family, had been doing export of Yunnan herbs and teas to Taiwan back in the 90s. So I mean, he was very, very, very knowledgeable, and so I learned a lot from him. I owe him a great debt. But anyways, that's kind of a tangent, but kind of a little side story.
Yeah.
So anyways, gradually just adding more. And the thing is people don't realize, they see this huge selection of teas that we offer.
Right.
And, for me, like especially coming from, spending all my time in Yunnan and being in these wholesale markets and going down to Sichuanbana and going to all these different areas, and just the vast quantity of brands and productions that are out there, I feel like I've actually kind of created a filter for that. It's curated, it is a curated collection because, we have decided that these are the teas from literally tens and tens of thousands of possible teas that we are going to offer. It is a rather unwieldy amount, but it's like when you get into music and you start to really like dig deep into music or jazz or rock or classical, and you start to realize the depth of the tradition because you have time and you have all these people putting their unique stamp on things. Yeah. So in the case of tea, it's similar. Of course, it's more based on regions, but it also has to do with the styles of the tea factories, whether they're blended or whether it's an individual doing a single estate. So, I'd like to think that what we have is actually, it's just a tiny little microcosm of what's out there.
Yeah, which is mind blowing.
It really is. It's an incredible tradition. So
cool. James, you want to ask?
Yeah, and one thing else that we've learned is a bit more like how the sort of operation of Yunnan Sourcing does. Like you're the most front-facing person. You do a lot of the customer service and stuff, but we've learned that like your wife, for instance, is a very important part of it. So I don't know,
absolutely. My wife, she is a local Yunnanese. I met her quite a ways back, many years ago in Kunming. She's not from Kunming originally, but she is from Yunnan, and she's always been a big help to me because China is a complicated place, and especially when you're doing business there, and it really requires. You can really benefit from having a local person to help you. So that's kind of how she started out. It's just kind of helping me and, talking to people, finding ways, to do things and things like that. In the beginning, I was always the person that chose all the teas and vetted all the teas. But kind of gradually, too, because she's been involved heavily for so many years now. Tea is very much a part of her life. And, she's got a great palate. She is really, really good at selecting teas. So, now like in in the last couple of years. A lot of the green teas and black teas, and some of the Pu'erh Mao Chas are ones that she's actually chosen herself. And of course, I drink them too, just to check. It's always, two heads are better than one, especially when it comes to tea. And every time you drink tea, it's like, well, you're kind of hoping that that you're on that day. You have on days and you have off days, so it's really good to have more than one person involved. And she's in her own right a tea master, in my opinion. She's hopefully we'll have tea with her a little bit later, and we can ask her some questions.
Cool. So you guys, for the folks out there who don't know, you guys actually operate directly out of China as well, and you have some folks in China who help do fulfillment and shipping and stuff like that. And then you guys also have a local U.S.-based company, and that's just for the folks out there who want to get stuff a little bit faster. I would say go for the local U.S. company. Less selection by far,
but still a couple hundred teas.
A lot of tea, and the teaware you'll get will come to you very quickly. Shipping is actually awesome.
Yeah, and we're going to keep expanding that now that we're based here. We're kind of splitting our time between China and the U.S. now, and that's nice. It's nice to have that back and forth, to be able to go back and forth, but to also be able to really try to develop the business here. And we have a lot of space, and we also really are hoping that before the end of the year we'll get a container of teawares.
Nice.
So all these bulky items and all this stuff that's like you put in your cart, and it's like a $4 Chahai and a $7 Gaiwan, and then it's $20 shipping. You're like, what?
Yeah.
And it's just, that's the thing, is like with the shipping from China, and especially from Yunnan, even though we actually get a huge discount from China Post, it's still pretty expensive, and it's slow, and things break. So we really want to get a shipping container, or at least a partial one, of stuff with teawares directly from China, get it here cheaply, and to be able to offer those items with our flat rate $7 shipping, which I think is, I'm excited about. Something I wanted to do for years and years and years. And one of the reasons that we're here now, and we're kind of setting up this base here in the U.S., in Oregon, in Bend, Oregon, to be able to do stuff like that, and just to be able to, kind of just expand tea culture here in the U.S. and hopefully be able to offer people things, that they otherwise would have to maybe wait a couple months to get if they wanted to get it shipped cheaply. So.
Yeah, one other interesting thing that we've obviously been drinking a lot of tea, and Scott, you obviously drink a ton of tea here, and a lot of time you're just testing teas and tasting new teas and stuff like that. So we've been hearing sort of about your routines on how you manage to do so much teas, with eating or with exercise and stuff like that. Can you speak a little to that?
Yeah, I think the thing about tea is, it's not just you're experiencing the tea. You are experiencing the tea, but at the same time, the tea has its own properties, and your body has its own properties. And your body, when you come to the table and you drink tea, I think if you'll probably notice that some days, maybe you didn't sleep as well, or maybe you ate something, you're having stomach problems, or you're unhappy, or whatever, and it just changes the whole experience. So, for me, kind of gradually, I've learned that, if you want to really experience and get the most out of these teas, the best thing you can do for yourself is really just take care of yourself as much as possible. I every morning I run 3 to 5 miles with my dog Lucy, and in the summer I love to take a cold shower, then I'll eat some breakfast, and then I'll drink teas. Sometimes I'll drink tea. I'll drink a ripe tea, a ripe Pu'erh, before I do my exercise routine. But I think the thing about these teas, and especially these Pu'erhs, and especially raw Pu'erh, is it's very powerful. Yeah. It's got, it has a very powerful qi in it. The word qi, it's a kind of a loaded term. What does it mean? But it's the energy that's in the plants that's coming up from the ground, and we're receiving it, and it's definitely a gift. It's like food too. you eat vegetables, and you eat fresh vegetables, and you get qi, you get energy from it. I mean, you can scientifically quantify it, but at the same time, it's almost more simple to just say, yeah, we get qi. We get qi from nature. We get qi from tea. We get qi from food. Yeah. And we get love from each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, that's one of the things I think is just, really, I try to take care of myself, eating well and exercising so that I can drink these teas. Because sometimes, especially like in the spring when we drink the mao cha, I'll drink 10, 12 mao cha a day, and I'll do several steepings of each. So, it can be a little bit rough sometimes.
It's a lot of tea.
But you really, being able to, taking care of yourself, taking care of your health is just, you're just going to get more out of the tea, I think. And that's, definitely important for me. So,
kind of piggybacking on that idea about tasting so much teas, I know that you folks, not too recently, but fairly recently, have started your own Yunnan Sourcing productions. And we've had a bunch of them on the show, and we've enjoyed tons of different teas that you guys have pressed and produced and tasted and curated and blended. When did that start, and what was the impetus for that? And, speak a little bit about that.
Sure,
It's very unique. I think that's, a lot of folks out there can go out and meet a tea farmer and then sell their tea. And not a lot of folks. It's an uncommon thing. But plus the pressing and the kind of really much more deeper involvement, I think that brings something a little bit different. So. Well,
yeah, I had been in tea, working with Pu'erh and doing Yunnan Sourcing really for about 5 years. Mm-hmm. When in 2009, I was approached. I had a Korean friend who was kind of doing Pu'erh business in Kunming as well, and he was like, "Hey, maybe we should do do some productions," because he had actually done a couple for some Korean people that he knew, and I said, "Okay, yeah." So we sat down and we drank mao cha together, and we decided a few of the ones that we wanted to do, and it was really exciting because I was kind of getting, I wouldn't say bored, but like the excitement level of the initial few years back in like 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007. And then there was the whole big Pu'erh boom bust in 2006 and 2007. And so like I was feeling a little bit, the whole factory teas, Xiaguan, Monghai, and while I like those teas and I think they're good teas, it didn't require as much of my energy, attention, creativity to be involved in them. Mm-hmm. It was more deciding which ones I liked and purchasing them and holding them. So that when the idea of creating our own teas came about, it was just so exciting. It was just opened this whole new, door, and my excitement level went way up. And I was just, I was like, wow, this is great. I'm involved. I can choose, and just really trying to work the connections that we had already with growers and people that dealt in mao cha. So in 2009 we came out with a few different productions. I think our first production was the Yola production from 2009, the Wuliang Lanxiang production from 2009, which sold out a long time ago. The Yolo production, actually, we still have a bit of because we made more of. And then, after that, I just kind of went my own way. I didn't do those early productions. I don't know if you've looked at the wrapper, but it says Yun Zhi Yuan, and it says Ri Cao Xiang in Chinese with the leaf logo. And
leaf logo.
So the Ri Cao Xiang was my Korean buddy's label.
Got it.
So we kind of just so then those 2009 productions, you'll see that, and that's kind of those are our co-productions. So I mean, really, maybe some of the best ideas weren't mine, but I was excited.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'll just keep going with this, and we kept going, and now here we are. Wow, it's 2015, 2009, 2010, 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15. Wow, we're in our 7th year now, so.
It's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And
it's been exciting.
And speaking of kind of new new developments and exciting projects. You guys have recently just launched a fairly large, intensive, and kind of new chapter in the sourcing business brand, I guess, right? So you want to speak a little bit about Taiwan Sourcing?
Yeah, I've traveled to Taiwan several times over the last 7 or 8 years, and just really enjoy the culture and especially the tea. The Taiwanese are, masters of in their own right. I mean, unparalleled, in terms of what they produce, in terms of quality and uniqueness. And so I've been a fan of Taiwanese teas, especially oolongs, for quite a while now. And I made connections, also people that I met, Taiwanese that I met in Yunnan, in the Tea Mountains, who are involved in Pu'erh, but also involved and connected with the whole tea industry in Taiwan. So I met a lot of people like that, and I've traveled there, and I just decided, okay, let's do it. And so in the winter, I worked some of the contacts that we had developed, and got some winter oolongs and had them sent here to the U.S. site. Originally, I wanted to send a bunch to China, but in fact, sending tea from Taiwan to China isn't.
It's a
big deal. It's not something that you can do really, not in any quantity. So I ended up with a plan to do that, and so ship the most to China, where we sell on the .com site where we sell most of the products, and then ship a lesser amount to the U.S. site here. But we ended up having to ship all of them here, and then so we kind of sat down and rethought stuff, and we. I talked with some of the people that I work over there with, and particularly our good friend Simon, who is doing the shipping, and he's doing most of the sourcing actually. So it's the first time I've really worked with somebody. Of course, I get the final say of whether we're going to carry it or not. But he's a local guy, Taiwanese guy from Taichung, and he's incredible. He's a powerhouse, and he has given us hundreds and hundreds of choices of teas that we can carry, and he's given his own input, and he's been just amazing. So, we're really excited to be able to ship teas directly from Taiwan now, which is the way that it should be done, and now we have the opportunity to do it. And shipping from Taiwan is way cheaper than shipping from Yunnan, way faster. So we're able to offer flat rate shipping from Taiwan for $8 for air and $14 for EMS. I wish I could do it from Yunnan.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so it's really exciting. I'm really excited to be involved in that, and that's kind of a cooperation partnership with somebody there, which is kind of different than Yunnan Sourcing, where it's kind of me, my wife, and her family that are kind of in charge of that. So it's, I think that there's incredible variety in Taiwan, there's incredible teas, and I think that the way that we approach them, we have our unique take. There's other good Taiwan tea sellers out there, and, I have a lot of respect for them.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can have a little bit of a little bit of a place there, and we just look forward to getting feedback from people and continuing to really just push the bar up in terms of quality, and I think that our initial offering is really quite good. I think you can give it a try. Anyways, I don't want to plug too much, but I'm excited.
No,
it's hard not to be excited about.
Yeah, it's cool. I think,
yeah.
and I'm just speaking from my own personal experience. It's fun just to be excited about new projects and to do stuff like for James and I'll speak for both of us probably. Come here and expand our different experiences with TeaDB as well. So it's super cool. What other questions do you have, James?
This is a little bit going back towards other stuff, but
sure.
Like you mentioned previously to us yesterday, I think, about just how you make decisions on what you want to buy and what you want to source and stuff like that. And you never make the decision kind of when you're at the mountain or something like that. You bring it back, and sort of like that importance of just like bringing it back to sort of the consistent space where you're comfortable or whatever.
We talked about like a lab almost.
In the beginning, I would go and drink tea everywhere, and I would, you're sitting, and when you're sitting with the people that are maybe offering the tea for sale to you, whether they're the tea growers or they're wholesalers or whoever, you don't have the space and to really feel comfortable to make the right decision because you want to be respectful. And also, I find that everywhere that you go, you have different water, you have different temperatures, you have different smells, you have different brewing parameters. Either maybe most of the time when you're at somebody else's place, they're brewing the tea. They could get a phone call and then boom, the tea's sitting there, whatever. But so I really like to have, in China, I have my space set up to drink tea, and I drink, I would go to the tea mountains, and I would go to the wholesale tea market, and I would gather the samples, or my wife would gather the samples, or people that we've worked with in the past will send us the mao cha or the tea or whatever, and I will drink it in the same place with the same water, with the same base teaware pots. I have my raw pot and my ripe pot, and I have my Taiwanese oolong pot, and I have a wee pot that's over there. So. But really, when I evaluate teas, it's pretty much always with a gaiwan, just because a gaiwan is very neutral. But I think more important than that is the space and the water, just that consistency, just really like being really consistent about the space that you brew in. Again, like personally, like, did you take care of yourself? Did you eat well? Did you sleep well? That's important to me too, because if I haven't slept well, it's hard for me to like really say like, this tea is this, and I'm going to make a decision, I'm going to buy this tea. I have to be able to really be confident in that decision. So, it's kind of like you said, it's kind of like having kind of a laboratory where you have control over, the parameters. And then just taking the, I also drink a lot of teas blind as well, especially mao cha, and ripe teas too. So like maybe I'll have 8 samples, and I'll just I'll put them in order. Like I'll put them next to me on the bench, in an order, and I'll take them out, brew it. I won't look at it. I put it over here in the same order, and I'll just drink them side by side, one after another, making notes, but never looking at what is it from Pasha, is it from Yiwu, or which village in Yiwu. Or is it from Jingu area? I don't look at that, and I don't look at the price, because I just I think that the mind creates all these biases, and if we separate the tea from where it's from and its price and all this other stuff, and maybe like I said before, removing entirely from the people that are that want to sell it to you. That also is super important too, because it's like I can make a decision based entirely on the tea, and I think that. My whole thing about tea is that the tea speaks for itself. I'm selling the tea, and I've chosen the tea, but at the end of the day, it's the tea has to speak for itself. It has to be something that is worthwhile to me. And it's Pu'erh, it's investing. I'm investing my time. I'm investing my money, and I'm also asking my customers to invest their money. So, and that to me, that's It's very. I have to show a lot of respect for that, because when people are spending money to buy these teas and investing their money and maybe buying a tong to age, I want to make sure that I'm doing them a solid. I want to make sure that I've done my homework. So.
And I think I don't think that Scott's saying that you shouldn't drink tea unless you're in your little lab. That's not the point.
No.
The point is more that when you're doing something specifically like curating a huge catalog of teas, it is advantageous to make things a little bit more standardized. In that regard.
Absolutely.
Which I think most of us can appreciate.
Yeah.
And I know that it's fun just for me to throw 3 ripes down and just do side by side.
Yeah.
You know, so one thing we've talked about while drinking so much tea, and I'm getting a lot of energy off of this, is already.
Yeah, we should talk about this too.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
really quickly, we talked about, you know, after a certain number of tea sessions in a row, you can kind of get like tea fatigued. Your mouth is just like toasted, you know, a little bit. So what for some of the folks out there who maybe they just made their biggest, you know, $200 purchase from Yunnan Sourcing 3 months ago or whatever, 2 months ago, and finally their stuff just showed up and they're like super stoked. They have all this new awesome teaware. They can't wait to drink way too much tea. They woke up at 5 a.m. so they can get started early. And so for those folks, what would you recommend, you know, if you are going to drink 5 teas in a row or whatever, to be able to actually, you know, have those little fine-tuned, noticing those little fine-tuned differences, right? What would you suggest for folks out there?
Well, and it depends what teas you're going to drink. I typically, when I start out, if I'm going to drink a bunch of different teas, and not always, but I tend to want to start out with the more subtle teas, like ripe tea. I don't find to be overpowering, like cha-chi wise, and it's easier on my stomach. I notice that if I drink raw pu'erh first, it tends to overpower the teas, especially the tea after it, and maybe the second tea after it, because of the strength of the tannins. A really good raw pu'erh is something that should stay in your mouth and your throat, and it can even cause kind of a mouth-watering effect along the sides of your tongue. Yeah, and that was kind of the classic thing that actually some people that could in China will, you know, that do pu'erh could actually do to try to cheat people, which is brew them a really good raw pu'erh, and then brew them a not so good either raw pu'erh or ripe pu'erh after it, and you're going to be tasting, wow, that's sweet, and it's got this great mouthfeel, and it's like you're just tasting the tea that came before it. So it's kind of you have to be aware that how the teas individually would affect you, and then the fact that they're still affecting you when you're drinking the next tea. Of course, drinking a bunch of water, drinking some water, having a meal, going for a run, getting up, anything, just breaking it up a little bit, you know, helps. Definitely drinking water, moving around will help, and then you can kind of get back to it again. Because I've got a lot of experience and for me it's like you know, I got to have stamina sometimes to be able to go through all the teas and to be able to, you know, and like you said, I mean, having kind of a place. I mean, you know, for everybody, that getting in the groove or whatever it could be a completely different thing. But as long as you're in your groove and you know when you're out of your groove, and to, you know, to be able to recognize that when you drink tea, you know, you can, if you're out of your groove or whatever and you want to just keep going, that's fine. But, you know, if you really want to get the most out of the teas, it's good to really just kind of create a progression, maybe ripe pu'erh, then maybe like if you had a black tea, maybe a black tea and then a raw pu'erh, or maybe, you know, ripe pu'erh, a jade oolong, a wu yan cha, a raw pu'erh, and then fall down. or you know, or explode. So, you know, exactly, and you know, it's like they're powerful teas, and that's kind of one of the things that I'm going for when I choose teas. Is like I like to feel it, you know, and I like, especially raw pu'erh. It's not just like, oh, it's not just taste. It's the whole feeling, you know, and the experience. And the experience. So, you know, everybody's got their different way, and you know, I've got my way.
So let's do the atypical thing and wrap up with the tea tasting. I know that while sitting here doing the interview, I have heated up so much, and I am really awake. So I'm really enjoying this tea. What do you think about this tea, James?
Yeah, it's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
At the very least, this is still early in the morning for us, so we just ate our breakfast, and I can feel the tea just kind of flowing through me. But it's I noted a little bit of cooling in the first mouth cooling in the first couple infusions. Strong. Scott, you had mentioned that this tea had changed a little bit in the past couple of years since you had tried it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it actually it's one of those teas that right after pressing, it actually kind of reminded me a little bit of an Iwu tea. It was very kind of light, fruity, floral, and it's interesting because it's from Fengqing.
Yeah.
But it just really reminded me of an Iwu tea a lot, and I think the interesting thing about Iwu teas is when they're young, they tend to be more floral, a little more forgiving, but then with a couple years of age, they develop like more power, more like a strong astringency, bitterness, mouthfeel that kind of hangs out. And this one really, I just remember when I first started drinking, I'm like, this is a really amazing tea, really unique, really nice area, old tea trees, and I just wanted to make it. And there wasn't that much. I think there was not even 30 kilos total. And I just made it, and I was confident it was good. But it really just like in the last couple, and you know, it's two plus years since it's been made. It really just kind of turned over a little bit and became stronger, similar to an Iwu tea. A lot of the really good Iwu teas have that tendency to actually get stronger after a couple of years, versus like a Lincang tea, Mengku or Yongde, which just right off the bat they're just boom,
right.
You know, just punch you out kind of strength. And so, anyways, yeah, Da Si, it's a good tea. Not cheap, but you know, a good tea. Wild arbor from some of the older tea trees, some of the oldest tea trees that I've encountered. It's good tea. At least, you know, if you're interested, check out a sample. You know, 25 grams or whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
And so where can folks check you out, learn more about, you know, follow you, plug, please do.
Yeah, if someone has never heard about you somehow.
Right, which is somehow,
possible.
Yeah.
What that means is that this is the first episode that they're watching
Which
at TeaDB.
possible, yeah.
YunnanSourcing.com. Check us out, Yunnan Sourcing US, if you want to maybe pick something up from the US here. And you can check out Taiwan Sourcing too, which is at TaiwanUlongs.com. We didn't get the Taiwan Sourcing address, but yeah, check us out. And you can check us out on Facebook, Yunnan Sourcing, Facebook.com/Yunnan Sourcing, Instagram /Yunnan_sourcing. Yeah, we didn't get that one either. Who took that? Anyways, check us out, Yunnan Sourcing. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guarantee that we will be drinking more Scott's teas on the show. I know that I have plenty more to get through. So, and James, if folks want to learn a little more about us, what should they do?
Yeah, come check us out at TeaDB.org. Hit that subscribe button underneath this video. Follow us on Instagram. And I think that's just about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we will see you guys next time.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching.
Cheers.